You can think of the American economy as this massive, powerful engine. And if that's the case, then the trucking industry is the fuel line, pumping goods and materials to every single part of it. But what happens when that fuel line gets clogged? Today, we're going to take a look at a critical warning light that's starting to flash in the trucking sector and figure out what it might be telling us about the road ahead.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get a sense of just how big this whole sector is. Then, we're going to zoom right in on the latest job numbers to see what's really happening. After that, we'll pull back to look at the longer story, hear what the experts are thinking, and then, most importantly, connect all the dots and see why this stuff matters to you.
Okay, let's start with the big picture. Before we can really understand the problem, you have to appreciate the sheer scale we're talking about here. And honestly, the number is, well, it's pretty staggering.
Just look at that. Almost 6.75 million people. That's how many jobs there are in the U.S. transportation and warehousing sector right now. And just to give you some perspective, that is the second highest number in history. We're talking about a colossal slice of the American workforce, covering everyone from airline pilots all the way down to the person who delivers your packages. So you see a number that high and you think, wow, things must be great, right? But like any huge engine, there are a lot of moving parts. And if you pop the hood and listen really closely, you can start to hear this troubling sound coming from one of its most critical components, trucking. And when we isolate that part, a very, very different story starts to emerge. So let's get right to the heart of it. We're going to put the most recent data under the microscope, and we're going to focus specifically on trucking jobs, because this is where that little warning light really starts to flicker. Okay, so here's the headline number from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Just over 1.5 million jobs in truck transportation. But a number by itself doesn't really tell you much. The real story isn't the number itself, it's the trend, or in this case, the total lack of one. And this right here, this chart shows you exactly what I'm talking about. Just look at how incredibly tight that range is. After the government did its revisions, the job numbers for May and July were identical. In August, a tiny, tiny dip of just 900 jobs. For an industry this huge, that's basically zero. We are looking at a sector that is completely flatlined for 5 straight months. Growth has hit a brick wall.
Now this is fascinating. Check out the contrast. While trucking is stuck in neutral, warehousing jobs are absolutely booming. They saw a massive upward revision of over 10,000 jobs in July. This tells us something really critical. The problem isn't everywhere. There's a huge shift happening. Momentum is moving away from the open road and into these giant e-commerce fulfillment centers.
So this 5-month stall is definitely concerning. But here's the thing. It's actually masking a much bigger and, frankly, more worrying story. To really get what's going on, we have to zoom out from just the last few months and look at the bigger picture over the last few years. This timeline really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Just a couple of years ago, the industry was hitting its peak. Then, bam, the shockwave hits, the collapse of Yellow Corporation, a giant in the industry just gone. And look at where we are today. We still haven't even recovered from that one event. The industry isn't just stalled. It's been in this slow downward drift ever since. Let that number sink in for a second. 34,000 jobs vanished in a single month from just one company failing. That wasn't just a dip, it was an earthquake that sent tremors through the entire industry. And clearly, the aftershocks are still being felt. The fact that total employment is still below where it was right after that collapse tells you the industry never really got back on its feet.
It's easy to look at these charts and numbers, but they represent real people, real families, real careers. The collapse of a company like Yellow, or just this broader stagnation that we're seeing, has a huge human cost. And we would genuinely love to hear from you. If you're a driver, or maybe a dispatcher, or you work anywhere in this sector, what has your experience been like these last couple of years? Please share your story in the comments below.
So we've seen the stall, we've seen the long-term decline. And the big question is, where do we go from here? Is this the new normal, or is there something else going on? To try and answer that, let's turn to some of the leading experts and see what they think.
Wow, that is a powerful word, malaise. Independent economist Aaron Terrazazas is not pulling any punches here. He sees these little monthly shifts not as signs of life, but really as symptoms of a deeper, more persistent sickness in the industry. He's basically suggesting this isn't just a temporary blip, it's a long-term period of economic blah with no clear way out. That's a really sobering thought.
But not everyone sees it as a sickness. David Spencer from Arrive Logistics offers a totally different perspective.
He uses this term capacity attrition, and he suggests that all this pain, the job losses, the stalled growth, might actually be a necessary market correction. That maybe the industry is just shedding excess weight to get itself back into a healthier balance.
So let's break down what capacity attrition really means in the real world. In short, it means that as companies go out of business and drivers leave the industry, there is simply fewer trucks on the road. Now that's incredibly painful for the people losing their jobs. But for the companies that survive, it means less competition, and that can lead to more stable and maybe even higher shipping rates. It's classic supply and demand, but the human cost of that rebalancing act can be incredibly high.
All right, we've been deep in the data, we've heard from the experts, but let's bring this all back home. Why should someone who isn't a truck driver or a logistics manager care about any of this? Well, the answer is simple. Because the ripples from this industry eventually reach every single household in the country.
I want you to think of the trucking industry as the canary in the economic coal mine. Trucks move pretty much everything we buy, something like 72% of all freight. So when people and businesses start buying less stuff, guess what? Fewer trucks are needed on the road. That's why a slowdown in trucking is often one of the very first warning signs of a wider economic downturn. It's a direct signal that impacts our entire supply chain and eventually the prices we all pay at the checkout counter.
So if you remember one thing, remember this. These job numbers are not just abstract statistics for economists to argue about. They are a real-time signal of the economic currents that affect the cost of your groceries, the availability of products, and the health of the entire economy. What happens on the interstate absolutely affects what happens in your wallet. And this all leaves us with one final really big question. We are living in an era of unbelievable change, from automation and AI to completely new consumer habits and global economic pressures. What does all of this mean for the future of one of our most fundamental industries? Is this current malaise a sign of permanent transformation? We are at a crossroads, and honestly, the path forward is anything but certain.
We really hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of the complex forces shaking up the U.S. trucking industry right now. It is so much more than just jobs. It's a critical barometer for our entire economy. If you found this explainer valuable, please take a second to like this and subscribe to our channel, LabWorks USA. And feel free to share this with anyone you think might find it interesting. Your support really helps us keep making content just like this. Thank you so much for watching.